Joining me is Connie Scothorn with CLS and Associates, and she is a landscape architect who does a lot of design with native plants. Connie, tell me a little bit. We're here at the UCO Pollinator Garden. Tell me a little bit about your approach here when you were designing this.
You know, this garden was different than probably any other garden that I've done. Granted, every garden we do is different, but this one was driven by Gloria because she is such a native plant enthusiast. And she had a list of plants that she wanted to include. No one has ever come to me like that. And so what we did was we took her list and we looked at what we could find, what's commercially available, what will actually do good in this garden and in this environment. And then we designed the garden so that it would be attractive to people first, because if it's not attractive to people, no one's going to keep it.
Right.
And then second, that it will be attractive to pollinators and help the birds and the bees and the butterflies, and especially the bees because of John. And then, you know, make it accessible so that people can walk through the garden and walk and be part of the garden instead of just looking at it from a distance. I think those are probably our main goals in working in this design.
Well, I know a lot of times people look at a garden that has more native plants and they might think, it's a little hairy for me. So how do you approach it, like with those design concepts, and maintain a design using some more native plants?
You know, I think you can design a native garden so that it looks just like any other garden. Mm-hmm. You know, you can use by plant selection, you can pick plants that are more tame, or you can pick plants that are gonna, you know, spread a little bit. It depends on what the goal of the garden is in the beginning. We've certainly done some native gardens that you would never know were native. Sometimes we sneak them in. On the other hand, it's so much easier to take care of. It's so much easier to have flowers in your garden. I think flowers, why would you have a garden if you didn't have flowers? And these, you can even see it. Here we are in the middle of August, the worst time to have a garden, and there's flowers blooming all over this place.
And I know that was one of your strategies, right? Is to constantly have something. And that takes some skill to plan out perennials.
Yes.
Because unlike annuals that are constantly blooming, perennials have kind of a shelf life of their bloom time.
They have a time, and sometimes they'll bloom and then they'll stop and then they'll bloom again. But we wanted to make sure that there's something always blooming at all times, from early spring all the way through the very end of fall, so that we can keep those pollinators fed and happy and active here. So it's so much fun to see.
Absolutely. And you mentioned a little bit that it is lower maintenance, but it is not a no maintenance garden, right?
Especially when you first start, you are pulling weeds just like you would in any new garden. Mm-hmm. And you know, sometimes it's overwhelming, but any new garden is going to have weeds. And this one, you know, this is a really large space. Okay. So that's part of it. If you're going to have a really small native garden, it's no worse than anything else. But then once you're in year 2 and 3 and more, it becomes easier and easier to maintain. For one, you don't have to water all the time. Water maybe once or twice a year, and probably not even that. Right. You don't have to spray. You don't have to fertilize. You don't have to trim it like you do. We pretty much look at trimming once a year in the spring to cut the old growth down, and then that's all. So it's really easy.
And you mentioned watering. I think a lot of times people think, it's just a matter of throwing out seeds and letting them do their thing, right? But you do have to establish these plants.
You do. I mean, there is such a thing as planting wildflower seeds. And if you do that, it can be beautiful, but you will have a messier garden than you do. And a lot of our Oklahoma wildflowers will do beautifully just by planted by seed. This one is not, because we wanted a more organized garden, and we wanted to include all these different species that we included.
Well, as a landscape architect, I'm trying to have a list of plants and source those plants. Can you tell me a little bit about that process and the availability of some of these plants?
Well, you know, even since we first started this garden, the availability of native plants has become much more available. We find them now in a lot of nurseries that are dedicated to just selling native plants in Oklahoma City, and I'm sure there are some in Tulsa also. I know there's one in Stillwater. So there are people like that, and then now even some of the more established commercial nurseries are starting to sell native plants too. It's a movement, I keep saying, it's a movement, it's catching on, and we're really happy to see that. So native plants are becoming much more available.
What would you say to anybody that might be on the edge of, should I go that way with my design or not?
See, I can't figure out why anybody wouldn't. But you should. For one thing, our bees and our birds and all of our pollinators are in serious decline, and we need to provide food for them. I mean, the birds are down by a third in the last 50 years, so that's 3 billion fewer birds that we have now than we did 50 years ago, and that's scary when you start thinking about the future and what's going to happen 50 years from now. Are we going to have birds to enjoy?
So Connie, tell me a little bit, I believe your firm just sort of shifted to this native design in the last 10 years or so. Was that because of the birds?
Well, the birds are really important, but when we started shifting to native plants, it was really more client driven. We had several clients that wanted their landscape to start looking more like Oklahoma. And so we started doing the research and realized, yes, this is what we should be doing. And then we realized the problems of finding the plants. So it's been a growing process. It's definitely been a process of learning. Like I said, we learn something new on every project, something that does well, something that does too well sometimes. And I have a native garden in my own house, and it's just fantastic because, again, I'm learning things, and sometimes I learn that I need to take this plant and give it away.
And the gardens are just more interesting to walk through, right? Because of what you discover and you see.
They're so much more interesting, and it's great to go to other states and to other gardens and go to other cities and see what types of plants they're using and see how they're succeeding. Because even though we may have a plant that's native here in Oklahoma, it's also going to be native in Kansas, but it might grow a little bit differently.
Absolutely.
So it's just fun to see how the plants are going to grow and what they do, and it's all beautiful.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this with us today.
Thank you.
For more information on sourcing native plants, visit the Oklahoma Native Plant Network's website.
We hope you enjoyed this video as part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on the OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.